Hello and welcome to the May 2025 edition of Virginia Wine Notebooks blog and YouTube channel. The channel where we mix a Virginia wine with an underrated piece of popular music or rock music, an album that is somewhat underrated or overlooked or forgotten. Because at this point, you think about some of the classic albums that came out in the 70s and the 80s, even though they were popular back then, very popular in some cases, they may be forgotten now. So unless you're a real enthusiast for vinyl or music in general, that's what I'm trying to focus on here, but also on Virginia wine. The spotlight is definitely Virginia wine. So I'm going to talk about a Virginia wine, and I'm going to try to marry it or pair it with a piece of music that kind of correlates to the wine in some way or another. And I always try to find a connection between the wine or winery that I choose and the album or the band that I choose. So today we're going to be talking about a winery in Northern Virginia. And I've been focusing too much in the last couple of episodes on wineries in the Shenandoah Valley part of Virginia or the Piedmont part of Virginia, because those are the wineries that are in closest proximity to me. So I concentrate on those because I can get to them very easily. I used to be able to get to the Northern Virginia wineries pretty easily because I used to live there, but I don't live there anymore. So going to Northern Virginia, unless I'm going up there for a family event or my job or whatever, or to see a show, I very rarely am in Northern Virginia anymore. And the one thing I do miss about living in Northern Virginia is the access to all the wineries. Loudoun County. This is the county I'm going to concentrate on today, and the winery that I'm going to focus on. Loudoun County, as of May 2025, Loudoun County has 50 wineries. 50. That is more wineries than many states have in total. Of course, not as many wineries as California and New York and those other states, but Virginia is definitely, I have to look at the statistics. I haven't looked at the stats in a while to see where Virginia ranks. Last time I checked, a couple of months ago, Virginia was, I think, number 5 or maybe even number 6. Because California is number 1, obviously, in wine production in the United States. Washington State, I believe, is number 2. Oregon is number 3. Number 4 is New York State. Believe it or not, New York State's got a lot of wineries. Number 5 was Virginia for a while, but last I checked, Texas was kind of nipping at its heels. Texas likes to do everything big and better, as we know. So I wouldn't be surprised if Texas has surpassed Virginia at this point. I'll have to check again. But right now, I would say Virginia is probably number 5 or number 6, maybe number 7, somewhere definitely in the top 8 for sure. So anyway, enough of that, enough of stats. We're going to talk about the wine. The wine I'm going to talk about, the winery I'm going to talk about right now, is what I think may be the northernmost winery in Loudoun County. Loudoun County is a county that borders the Potomac River, of course. It's west of Fairfax County. It's west of Washington, D.C. It's right on the line of, you have West Virginia bordering it on, actually, no, I take that back. I don't think West Virginia borders it quite. But on the north, you have Maryland bordering it. So this winery is actually the northernmost winery in Loudoun County. And I think it's only like a mile, or maybe a mile and a half from the Maryland border, the Potomac River. I'm talking about Hidden Croft. And Hidden Croft Winery is named Hidden Croft. There are a lot of wineries with croft in the name, C-R-O-F-T. And croft means like a tranquil, very peaceful setting. And usually it's farm or a countryside. We have Willow Croft, which is also in Loudoun County, southern Loudoun County. And around Charlottesville, you have Oakencroft, which just reopened. Oakencroft was one of the original wineries of Virginia. They had closed when the original owners retired, and it stood vacant for a long time. And now apparently Oakencroft is open again. So I need to go down to Charlottesville and check them out because they were one of the first wineries I went to. So 3 wineries with the word croft in the title. Hidden Croft is close to Lovettsville, Virginia. And again, Lovettsville is the first town you hit when you take I can't remember the highway number that goes between Lovettstown and Brunswick, Maryland. You can write it in the comments. I can't, because again, I don't live there anymore. I can't remember the highway. It's a highway that goes through those towns. I think it originates around Purcellville, Virginia, and it cuts through Lovettsville, and then it takes you over the bridge, over the Potomac River into Brunswick, Maryland, and then it goes out to Frederick, Maryland. So I can't remember the highway number there, but anyway, I'm going to tell you what the highway number is because I got Google right here, and because I want to point that out because there's a reason why I'm bringing up the highway number, and that is because this winery is called Hidden Croft for a reason. It's hidden. It is not a winery that if you drive into Loudoun County, you're not going to find it on any of the major highways. It's not on Route 9. Route 9 is a highway that goes between Purcellville and Hillsborough. It's not on Route 7. It's actually on route, here we go, no wonder I couldn't remember the highway number, 287. Who remembers a highway with 3 numbers in that, 287? Unless it's 495, I'm not going to remember that. So 287 is the highway that it's off of, and there's signs, and of course if you've got an app, the Wi-Fi in this area of Virginia and Loudoun County is a little spotty. There are a couple different ways you can get to Hidden Croft, but do your research, use your map, use your navigation system, Siri or Alexa or whatever bot you use in your car, use them. They'll eventually take you to Hidden Croft, and Hidden Croft has been around for quite a few years. I remember going to Hidden Croft for the first time, I think in 2005, possibly 2004, somewhere around there, back when their tasting room was actually in the area where they make the wine, the big kind of the crush pad area. There was like a metal building or an industrial type building. That's where their first tasting room was. They had a little patio off the side. I think in 2008 or 2009 or 2010 even, they moved their winery over to an old house that's on the property, and that's where they are now. They still do counter tastings. They have a wonderful outdoor seating area. When it gets really, really busy or when they have an event or a live band, they open up the barn. There's a barn that you actually walk through the tunnel of the barn. There's a tunnel that's inside this barn. You walk through it, walk through the tunnel to get to the main tasting room. That barn is opened up when they have special events or when they're really, really busy. So they've got a lot of space. They've got a lot of space indoors in the old house, and they've got a lot of space on the property with a lot of tables with umbrellas and a deck and a lot of land, it's just a tranquil, peaceful place where you can just go and have a wonderful glass or two or bottle of wine and just forget about all your troubles. You really do feel like you're in a different part of Virginia. You don't feel like you're in Loudoun County. So you have to drive a little further to get there. It's not, like I said, it's not one of the wineries right on Route 9. I don't even know if they have a highway sign. Willowcroft, which I think I talked about Willowcroft in an earlier edition of Virginia Wine and Song back in 2017 when I was doing the original videos way back then. I think I talked about Willowcroft then, maybe not, I'll have to check. If I haven't, I need to talk about Willowcroft very soon because they're in the southern part of Loudoun County. Another drive that you have to get to Willowcroft. And I think Hidden Croft and Willowcroft, I think those the winemakers and owners of those two wineries are they work very much in unison. And that's the nice thing about the Virginia wine industry is you have a really friendly camaraderie with the different winery owners. You know, there's not a lot of competition, rivalry. There is rivalry, but it's friendly rivalry. It's not like the Hatfields and McCoys. It's in most cases I found that way about Virginia. That's one of the nice things about this industry. So anyway, that's I pontificated enough about the winery. I just wanted to talk about how wonderful it is to make that extra drive to go there. So please do. And if you're lucky, a member of the family will be there serving the wine. Clyde is the owner and the winemaker. He was around a lot when I first started going to this winery, but I think he's got a staff now, including the members of his family, I think, work there now on a regular basis. So you're going to be treated really, really well there. They do food pairings, I think, with some of the wines as well. And they, like I said, they still do counter tastings. They also do flights. But the wines, let me just talk about the wines. The wine selection here, this is the first winery in Virginia that I ever had a Traminette. And if you're familiar with white wines and Traminettes, you know they have a tendency to be a little on the sweeter side. And the Traminettes here do have a little touch of sweetness to them. They're a little bit sweeter than my taste. I still like them, and I drink them if I just have a tasting of them. I usually don't get a bottle of that, but if you want something that's a little bit on the sweeter side, which is actually kind of hard to find in Northern Virginia, or Virginia in general, a lot of Virginia wineries don't have any sweet wines. So that's why a lot of the Virginia wineries are now offering other options like cider, because if you don't like dry wines, what are you going to drink when you go to a winery? You got to find something, or White Claw, not White Claw, but a lot of wineries are doing their own sparkling seltzers as well. But anyway, Traminer is a wine. The first time I had it, it was a little touch of sweetness, but it was very, very good. They actually have two different types, an amber style, they call it amber, which I think is a little bit drier, and then they have a regular Traminer, which is a little bit on the sweeter side. They have a rosé. Most wineries do have a rosé now, and they're all pretty much dry. They do a lot of work with Chambourcin. This is a good Chambourcin winery. Chambourcin is a very popular grape, especially in Northern Virginia. The soil is really, really good in Northern Virginia for Chambourcin. Chambourcin actually, as I found out recently, is the state grape of Pennsylvania. Yes, Pennsylvania does have vineyards, and Chambourcin does very, very well in Pennsylvania because of the climate and the soil. I don't think they have a lot of wineries in Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania has really, really antiquated ABC laws, so that probably restricts the wineries that they can have there. But Northern Virginia, and I think Maryland has them too. I haven't been to a lot of Maryland wineries, but I'm sure they do Chambourcin in Maryland as well. Anyway, they do quite a few Chambourcins. They have a reserve Chambourcin, they have a regular Chambourcin, they have a Chambourcin Rosé, they have a Tannat, one of the very few wineries in Virginia that does a Tannat. Tannat is a winery that does really well in Uruguay, South America. It's a red, it's a very bold, very tannic red, and it goes really, really well with heavy meat dishes. They have a Tannat there. I think that's their most expensive wine, it's $41. By the way, the Traminer, the regular Traminer they have, which is a touch of sweetness, it's $19. So because there's so many wineries in Northern Virginia, I think some of them are adjusting their prices a little bit because they know how much competition is around. So that's a good thing. Competition is good. They have a Cab Franc, of course. They have a Cab Sauv. As far as whites are concerned, at least as of now on their website, they only have the Traminer. They have a Petit Manseng. Petit Manseng is also a little bit on the sweeter side. It's very fruit forward. It's got depending on the vintage, it may have different levels of sweetness. But I can drink Petit Manseng. Actually, I can drink Petit Manseng more than Traminer. Traminer has a little bit of a gingery, a little bit of a spicy quality to it. But Petit Manseng is very, very good. If you're a Chardonnay fan, or if you like the oakier type of white wines, you're probably not going to find a lot at Hidden Croft. You probably have to make do with a red, and you can't go wrong with the reds. They definitely, I think the reds are better than their whites. Their whites are good, but I associate this winery mainly with the reds, especially Chambourcin. They also have a couple of fruit wines, and they have a port style wine as well. Currently, they have a Petit Verdot done in port style. So they have a Chambourcin that's done in port style too, believe it or not. So Chambourcin is obviously a big one there. So for the wine that I have here, and I went into my rack and I completely forgot that I had this. And I'm glad I found it because I wanted to spotlight a winery in Northern Virginia. It's been a long time. And this is a squatty bottle. And of course, the squattier bottles indicate usually port style or dessert style. This is a dessert wine. This is not a port style. I probably should drink this. Or maybe not. It's 18% alcohol, so by volume. So the more alcohol, the longer you can keep it in storage. And I store my wine appropriately in a cool, dry place, so I'm sure this is fine. This doesn't even have a vintage on it, but this happens to be a dessert wine called the Cackling Crow, and the Cackling Crow, because crows are black. It's a blackberry type style. It is not a grape wine. It's actually, I think they do have grapes in this. There's some grapes in here, but they also, I think, have some blackberries as well. They're saying it's a perfect after dinner drink and perfect with your favorite cigar. So there's a fine line between fruit wines and dessert wines and port wines. Fruit wines you probably have to drink them a lot, pretty soon, because fruit wines don't age as well as the grape wines do. By fruit, I mean non-grape wines like cherry wine and apple wine and raspberry wine, strawberry wine, etc. This has got some blackberry in it, but it also has grapes for the aging. They use grapes. I don't know what kind of grapes they use. It doesn't indicate on here, but I remember having it one time I was there, and I really, really liked it. I usually don't go for this style of wine, but because it's got such a high alcohol content, I can age it for a while. I think I'm keeping it for a special occasion. So it's always good to have this type of wine around for a special occasion. Okay, so Hidden Croft Winery, or Hidden Croft Vineyards in northern Loudoun County, Virginia, Lovettsville, right on the border of about a mile from the bridge. After you cross over from Maryland into Virginia, you drive about a mile, you'll hit Lovettsville, you go another maybe half a mile after that, you make a right turn, and there's a dirt road, I think it's a dirt road, and just follow the signs. I think they have the highway grape cluster signs to direct you there, because this is for Virginia terms, this winery has been around for a while, so I think they do have the highway signs. So what wine goes with this? As I said, I try to match it with something for the music. I try to match the wine to go with something that's related to the band or the album. Now, because it's called the Cackling Crow, I could have picked Sheryl Crow or the Counting Crows or the Black Crows. It didn't even dawn on me that I didn't notice it was called that until I looked at the bottle just now. So I picked another band or another album, concentrating on the word hidden, because they're a hidden croft, they're a hidden oasis. So the album that I decided to focus, and again, it's not considered to be a lost classic, but I think it's an album that a lot of people may have forgotten about. It's from the 70s, it's Traffic. And Traffic, of course, was the band that Steve Winwood had with Jim Capaldi, and they put out a couple of albums in the late 60s and the early 70s that they're musician favorites. If you're a musician, even if you're a rock musician, a very popular rock musician like Greg Allman loved Traffic. They are considered to be the quintessential jazz rock kind of fusion almost. I'm not talking about Chicago and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I'm talking about even more experimental than that, kind of prog rock, bordering the prog rock territory. And they put out a couple of albums. Steve Winwood, of course, went off to become very, very popular in the 80s and the early 90s. But this was, and of course, he was popular in the 60s with the Spencer Davis Group. But this was the band he was in the longest. He was in this band, I think, from 1967 until 1974, I want to say. So that's a long stretch. In that period of time, he also branched off into stuff like Blind Faith with Eric Clapton. But he was always part of Traffic. So this is the Low Spark of the High Heeled Boys, which is I think it's their best album. They put out really good albums. I like them all, like John Barleycorn, Must Die, and Dear Mr. Fantasy, and of course you probably know those songs. Even if you were born in 2002, you may have recognized at least the song titles. The Low Spark of the High Heeled Boys is a 12-minute song that was played on a lot of rock stations in the 70s and even the early 80s. It was a perfect song for DJs at rock stations to play, because they could drop the needle on the song and go to use the restroom and get a candy bar out of the vending machine and a Pepsi, come back, and the song was only half over at that point. So it's a long song, but it really takes you on this journey. But the rest of the album is great too. Hidden Treasure is the first song on the album, and that's why I picked it, because Hidden Treasure is the name of the song. Hidden Treasure is Hidden Croft, which is the name of the winery. So it goes really well together. Jim Capaldi, who doesn't sing on a lot of Traffic songs, most of the vocals are done by Steve Winwood, but Jim Capaldi sings on Light Up or Leave Me Alone, which is also a song that was played quite a bit on AM album-oriented rock stations and FM rock stations in the early mid-late 70s, whatever. Rock and Roll Stew, Rainmaker. Rainmaker is probably, along with Low Spark of High Heeled Boys, the song. Rainmaker is the song that a lot of people recognize who are into rock and roll music. Again, I wasn't around. I was around when this album came out, but I was not very old. But I bet if you were in college or even high school, possibly in 1970. This came out in 1972. It's interesting. This is an original pressing, by the way. I bought it at a used record store. It doesn't have the year of release on the back of it, so I have to look at the album. But I want to say 72 it came out. And this is really, really cool. The used record store kept the insert from Island Records. They were on Island. Traffic was on Island Records. Steve Winwood solo was also on Island Records. This album came out in 19... It's not even on the label. How times have changed. They do not put the release years of albums, in the early 70s. I have to look it up. Low Spark of the High Heeled Boys. 1971. 1971. But it was on the radio for so much longer than that. That's why it's hard to remember when it came out. But this is the original Island label. Island was a very, very popular label, kind of an arty label in the 70s, and then it became a really, really popular label in the 80s because of bands like U2 and Steve Winwood, and even Robert Palmer was on Island for a while, and I think Grace Jones was on Island. A very popular label, and I think they ended up getting sold to Virgin Records, which is a British-based record company. They bought out Island. So anyway, this is Island albums. Island Records and Low Spark of the High Heeled Boys. The album cover is even artistic in its own way. It's purposely got these corners cut off. Like I've said in previous installments of this channel, they just don't do this anymore. They don't make packaging for music anymore. Everything is streaming. So you don't get stuff like this. And that's why I think record stores are so popular with younger people, because they missed out on this wonderful stuff where you can see the bands posing on the back of the album cover, and the album covers themselves are pieces of art. I mean, Supertramp and Talking Heads and Dire Straits and Genesis, they all embraced the album cover almost as much as they embraced the music. I mean, it was all part of the package. So anyway, Low Spark of the High Heeled Boys. Enjoy this album that opens with Hidden Treasure, and enjoy your hidden treasure from Hidden Croft. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.